This episode is brought to you by Progressive.
Are you driving your car or doing the laundry right now? Podcasts go best when they're bundled with another activity, like Progressive home and auto policies. They're best when bundled too.
Having these two policies together makes insurance easier and could help you save. Customers who save by switching their home and car insurance to Progressive save over $775 on average.
Quote a home and car bundle today at Progressive.com.
Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. National average 12-month savings of $779 by new customers surveyed who saved with Progressive between June 2022 and May 2023. Potential savings will vary, not available in all states.
Welcome to the Intrazone, a show about the SharePoint Intelligent Intranet. I'm your host, Mark Cashman, here with my co-host today, Chris McNulty.
Hi, Mark. Glad to be back on the podcast. Today in our guest segment, we'll be talking with Jason Moore and Stephen Rose from the OneDrive team.
And we're also going to be pulling in from our ecosystem, Hans Brender.
Hans Brender, known to the rest of the world as Herr OneDrive, or as they say in Deutschland, Mr. OneDrive.
That's right. So we've got a show packed with OneDrive goodness. We're going to title this show Ready Player OneDrive. So there might be a couple references of Ernest Cline or some other science fiction things.
It's interesting to have folks like you and I with a SharePoint background talking about OneDrive, because for us and for many of our listeners, the experience of OneDrive really began in SharePoint 2007 on premises with MySites.
Yeah, so on the business side of things, everything that has evolved into what we'll talk about today, OneDrive, started as the My Documents, the personal document library within the MySite. And really, that still exists today. That is the essence of what OneDrive is. But what's been stripped away is the My Profile and that ability to create sites. We now have other mechanisms where the profile is certainly at a much broader level across Office 365, and that's a good thing for end users across all the different applications. They are who they say they are. Their profile follows them from app to app. And from a sites perspective, you can go in and do your self-service site creation to create team sites, to create communication sites. And within those, certainly you can create unique experiences as you need them. So we've really honed that experience. And so OneDrive is essentially an experience built on SharePoint.
But I think it's important for folks who may not have looked at it before, if you remember what MySite was 10 years ago, absolutely we stripped away or relocated some of those personal site creation features elsewhere. But just that core file experience about syncing and enriching the files with things like cognitive services or image viewers, it is really Ready Player OneDrive looking at the future, the ability to do much more than you could have done 10 years ago with just, here's a file, I put it there, and I can come back to it in a year and it'll still be there.
You can think of this tagline of the episode as accept your reality or deploy OneDrive for a better one. And yes, we're stealing from the Ready Player OneDrive tagline. But as Chris mentioned, our guest perspectives are going to come from inside the OneDrive team, the engineering team, and the marketing team. And then we'll get that external perspective from Hans, who is one of our MVPs known as Mr. OneDrive, like Chris said, Herr OneDrive.
There's definitely been a lot of history. You know, OneDrive has gone through permutations and different names. And, you know, obviously, in the end, there can be only one drive.
Ooh, I like it.
One thing we will put in the show notes is during the renaming from SkyDrive to OneDrive, a friend of mine and I came up with an alternative logo, figuring out since Prince had abandoned unpronounceable symbol, we suggested an alternative logo for OneDrive, which would be happy to put into the show notes.
Interesting. That sounds like a great Easter egg for the show notes.
We're very excited for today's guests, Jason Moore and Stephen Rose. Jason is our OneDrive Engineering Partner Group Program Manager. Did I say that correctly?
You got it.
And Stephen, Senior Product Manager for OneDrive.
You betcha.
Welcome, gents.
Howdy. How you guys doing?
Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
So you guys are basically solely focused on OneDrive. Is that right? Is this true for the record?
That would be correct.
Absolutely.
Excellent. So first, I just wanted to congratulate you guys. You know, of course, the whole team focuses on a lot of things that Gartner does, everything that they're saying, and you have been working super hard for the last couple of years and just recently got named for the second year in a row as a leader in the Magic Quadrant for Content Collaboration Platform. I just want to congratulate you.
Thanks. Yeah, we ranked highest in execution and in vision. We beat, Google and some of our big competitors. And each year we just keep getting further and further to the right and up, which really I think speaks so much for the great work that Jason and his team have been doing and taking feedback from our customers and really turning it into a great combination of the things that they want and they've asked for, as well as things they didn't even know that they wanted, like files restore and KFM and some of these great new features we're bringing to our customers. So we'll talk about today.
For folks who are not familiar, who don't read Gartner day by day, content collaboration platform used to have a different name, right?
Yeah, that was the old file sync and share,
okay.
The EFS, electronic file sync and share.
So not crazy for OneDrive to do well in this category.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But it's a tough space, and our partners and competitors out there are always looking to innovate and do great work as we do. So it's a great testament to how far we've come in the past few years.
So one of the big things about it that folks don't always know is it's not just how does Gartner think you do on a number of ratings. They actually go out and interview customers.
Yeah.
So a big part of this is actually customers of OneDrive saying that they really love it. It's working great for them. And so that's kind of the thing that we get most excited about.
So just from a Gartner perspective, if I can get from Stephen, what were the baseline components that they really liked, that they thought maybe it was us catching up? And then just because you're our engineer in the studio, what were some of the delightful features? So Stephen, baseline.
From a baseline, they, obviously the integration with Office 365 is huge to just have this great end-to-end between SharePoint, Office, Teams. The fact that we've really just spent the last year really standardizing when you go to share, whether it's from mobile, from desktop, from Word, from Mac, from iOS, it looks the same and it works the same. And that level of integration, the fact that it's a free product, that you're going to get it if you have any of our Office licenses, and from that value that our customers are getting, not just in OneDrive, but how it works across the suite was huge. And that was the thing that they really called out, is as an end-to-end product to really help to protect your content, to help make it easy to find. And then the graph, the intelligence that wraps around it was very impressive to them. And that was really the key.
So you originally thought maybe to call it Silo Drive, but instead you decided to integrate.
Yes, absolutely.
Awesome. So the delighters, what were some of the things that you had mentioned one, but maybe you can walk us through a couple?
Some of the big things that we shipped in the last year have been things like files on demand, right? So that wasn't something that we could have in last year's MQ. It is in this year's as part of it because Windows is shipped with all of those latest capabilities, and all of the OneDrive functionality that enables files on demand to show up has come out. But on top of that, we've gone from under 100 file viewers in the last 2 years to over 300 different file types that we support natively in the experience, and that pops in a big way for customers. The thing I mentioned earlier about the customers, one of the things that really we look for in terms of the innovations that we know are landing is how do people review the product. And for the last several years running, we've kind of held the top spot on both iOS and Android in the category on reviews. I think I checked this morning, we're around 4.7 on iOS in the month of July and about 4.5 on Android. Incredibly strong reviews that we get from users actually using the end product. So not just something that an administrator likes and uses and wants to deploy, but the end users are asking for, and they're satisfied with that experience and even happy with it.
And kudos to having that over time. Getting that out of the gate, you'll get some fans and some people that are really excited, but over time you're going to get people that don't like, but eventually they're telling you they like.
We're over 1 million downloads on iOS, which is just mind-boggling.
That's awesome.
If you think about it.
That's awesome.
You're talking about some of that. I really also kind of want to add my own personal appreciation.
Sure.
The mobile app, I think, is really transformative when people start to deal with, I think, you see someone in a meeting or you're on a call, and historically someone's like, oh, that's great, I'll send you follow-up.
Right.
And the fact that I can, without even interrupting my flow, just take my phone out, find the file, share the link directly there, it just eliminates the friction of doing it later, which in my world, half the time later is never.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. No, absolutely. And that kind of integration into your life of taking all this analog stuff, making it digital is a big part of what OneDrive succeeds with, and where it kind of finds that niche of that works for me. That's what I wanted. You've solved an actual problem.
Yep.
We spent a lot of our time thinking about, as you know, Chris, like how do we actually solve a problem? Not just a feature that we could put on the back of the box, but what is someone's life going to be like? What is the day going to be like? And how is it going to be better than it's ever been before because they've now been able to take advantage of some new capability like that?
Right.
And then also extending those functionality into SharePoint. I mean, we talked about the previewers. You get those in SharePoint. You get those in Teams. As we start to work across it not just being in OneDrive, but you're getting that power in SharePoint. You're getting that power in Teams and in Yammer, and the ability to look at high-def videos from within OneDrive and bring those into Stream. So again, it's that full ecosystem, which we're bringing not just the functionality to one product, but across the whole suite. And that's really a key piece. Even Outlook, as we take a look at modern attachments and things like that.
So we're doing well in terms of where you've brought the product, and obviously it's grown and matured over time. Take us back and just give us that sort of concise view of where it got started. How did this thing that's now called OneDrive, where did it start?
Well, how long have you been at Microsoft now, Jason?
Oh, that's a long time. I hit 18 years a couple of weeks ago. Starting in working on File Explorer and the Windows shell, and eventually landing in a team in 2006 that I started called, at the time, I think the marketing guys called it Windows Live Folders, and I called it SkyDrive. And so that's kind of one of the genesis of what we have in OneDrive today. But actually, if you look at it, they say success has many parents. OneDrive actually came out of a lot of efforts going on at Microsoft and also ones that got acquired in. For example, FolderShare was a company we acquired in 2006, I believe, and they had built a P2P sync client product. At the same time, we acquired Groove. And Groove, if you remember, became the baseline product for what became Groove in Office for syncing SharePoint and OneDrive originally, OneDrive for Business, I should say. But there were products like Mesh, the Windows Live Toolbar had some capabilities here, and so on and so on and so on. We've built lots of different products and capabilities around the idea of, hey, you've got all these files. They can be on the computer. They can be in the cloud. We used to not call it the cloud. We just said they're servers. But they can be in the cloud. How do all that kind of get to a single point?
And then briefcase and go on.
Right. Oh, right. You could go. You could actually go way back to the mid-90s with our briefcase product in Windows, which lets you take a whole set of files and then put them on a USB stick, or really at the time a floppy drive, floppy disk, and walk away with it. Come back with your work the next day. I used to use that.
So lots and lots of tools.
Yeah.
And did you ever consider naming it 12 Drive?
12 Drive? No, that was not. It's funny. We should have involved you in the naming. Well, we started originally, and the very first release of the product that became SkyDrive was called, as I mentioned, Windows Live Folders. We went out in a very limited beta. I think 5,000 people was our limit. And we were very nervous, like how people would use storage. I think we gave everyone, and this was pretty hefty at the time, 500 megs of storage.
That's all you need.
That was bigger than some hard drives.
10 megabyte files. It was some pretty exciting stuff.
And I bet still people didn't use that much.
No, they didn't. No. Generally, the bell curve on that was pretty shifted to the left. But what happened was, after that first release, we decided, okay, we've got enough going on here. It's interesting enough. We want to go bigger. We think we can still call it a beta. We think that's okay. This is back at a time we were trying to get okay with using the term beta and having users use it. And if anyone's listening today and doesn't remember that time, it was also a time when none of us had smartphones that could, take pictures and upload them to the internet.
Pterodactyls in the sky.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Typewriters everywhere. And so we decided we'd call that product SkyDrive. We wanted to have a name that was evocative of both its intent, but also something that people could grasp as they were beginning this journey, very early version, and especially in consumer, moving to the cloud. And so we kind of went through a whole series of different products and tools as capabilities kind of evolved. We didn't know yet exactly what did we want. One of the reasons there were so many things going on in this space was everybody wanted to build something. They just didn't know how all the parts fit together. Over time, that evolved. We built out, SkyDrive was actually the very first place that we ever shipped the Office web apps before we even shipped them on SharePoint. And a big part of that was us learning at scale with consumers, where there's so many users. How would those products work? Shortly after it came to SharePoint, and then we started to build things like the sync clients against all of these things. I believe 2012 was the first time we built the sync client for SkyDrive consumer. And then shortly after, we took the SharePoint Workspaces stuff. We introduced Groove, which became the sync client for OneDrive for Business at the time, SkyDrive Pro, and then have kind of evolved since then. And the big moment, I think, kind of for our recent history was in early 2014 when we brought together the teams for OneDrive for Business and SharePoint Online with the team for OneDrive Consumer. And I'd come from the consumer world into that, and we kind of brought the teams together and said, okay, we're going to build a very consistent product. It's going to be something everyone wants to use. It's going to be fast. It's going to be reliable. It's going to be feature-filled. But we should probably call it one thing. And we had gone through some tough times with the SkyDrive name, and you can feel free to do an internet search on that later. But eventually we had a brand name that we just introduced called OneDrive. We'd rebranded all those pieces as OneDrive. It was handy. It was only 3 letters before Drive, so it was really easy to make a lot of those changeovers. And we said, we're going to build one product for each of these cases. So in the case of mobile, we'd started working actually for a while on a mobile product for SkyDrive Pro. But we decided, no, let's not do that. Let's actually bring it all together and say there's just the OneDrive mobile client, and it can access all of your files in consumer. If you have a consumer account, it can access all your files in business if you have a business account. And we'll go even further and say it can get access to all the files you have in SharePoint Online, all your team sites.
Which sounds like a good tagline.
Yeah. That was it's a great tagline.
I just took a note.
Oh, excellent. And then, of course, we did the same with the sync client. That took, I think, a little bit longer because we actually wanted to go in more stepwise function. When you think about mobile, it's mostly pulling, it's mostly accessing. But sync, oh my gosh, how many files do you have on your PC that this is actually the way you get to the cloud? We used to think about it as being sync was pulling some of the stuff down, but really it's this big migratory process for so many people. And so as we did that, we started first and foremost with building an incredibly reliable sync client. We knew we had to have a baseline that was great. And we borrowed pieces from all those things I mentioned. There are parts of the mesh code base that are part of our sync client.
I'm going to give a golf clap. I used to love Live Mesh.
Awesome.
Live Mesh was cool.
Folder share, probably the lion's share of stuff that did move forward came out of the folder share code base, but even capabilities out of Groove and other places that we were able to bring together. And the team really focused on how do we measure success here? Like, what does that look like? How do we define like metrics around reliability that are consistent? And we know we're not going to be able to sweep it under the rug and go, oh, well, that was a blip. That was a thing here. No, if something trips, it's because it's a real issue.
Today's a pretty big day for OneDrive and for SharePoint because SharePoint Server 2019 preview, officially July 24th, day of recording for this podcast, is when the OneDrive kind of takes the next step in its history. Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So one of the big changes that came with our new sync client and experience was to recognize the work that has to happen both on the client but also on the server. And so we'd been very much focused on building that on SharePoint Online, bringing the actual core components we built for sync in the consumer world to the online service for business. And SharePoint 2019 is the first time that those components also ship with the on-prem server, which means we can have the sync client work with SharePoint 2019. Right. So pretty good. That's deserving of a golf clap. And that's a pretty exciting moment for us as we bring SharePoint 2019 online and having that new sync client there. So that means you can have a single sync client and it works whether your files are in consumer or business, whether your files are in OneDrive or SharePoint, and then, of course, whether or not you're using on-prem. But the best part is, and the feature that I'm most excited about is we've also been able to bring the files on demand capability. So that will also work against SharePoint 2019. So you'll get the latest kind of and greatest out of those experiences.
You know, one thing as you're talking about it, kind of, if you look at the history, there's lots of different tools, but there's also lots of different experiences. And trying to maintain something that's consistent, whether you're going from on-premises to cloud or from mobile to desktop or web or Mac or Windows. What do you think are some of the most common user experiences and how do you kind of make sure they get baked into the product?
No, it's a good question. It's something we think about a lot. Maybe it's good to go to an example. A specific one that I'd give is the sharing control that Stephen mentioned earlier. So we designed a new sharing experience last summer. And we've been since then rolling it out and then continuing to tweak it and improve it across our experiences. But it's a server-driven one. So that means whether you're right-clicking and sharing in Windows Explorer, you're doing it on your Mac Finder, you're doing it on the web, you're doing it in mobile, you're getting the same consistent sharing experience wherever you go. And the idea behind that is we reduce the amount of learning and training that people have to have. We make sure that there's only one place to go update. So as a new policy, for example, becomes available for an admin, they're able to control that across all of those capabilities. And then, of course, the actual experiences, we add new features in this experiment with what are the new capabilities that are going to come there. We're able to look at that across all of those. So that's kind of maybe in a nutshell, a best case example of that. And we think about this a lot. An example of something that is not 100% consistent, but we agonize about is folder design, the icon for the folder. So if you think about it, on every single device in the world, and even between versions of operating systems on those devices, they have an icon for folders. Right? On Windows, it's traditionally been a yellow manila folder kind of thing, but it's gone through some other colors. On the Mac, you've got a different design, and you've got, of course, iOS, Android, etc. And so in OneDrive, what we decided to do is to standardize on the icon design in the OneDrive experience proper. And that's the folders you see today there. But we continue to tweak them. We continue to tweak them for accessibility, to make them more visible and easy to find on a page, but also trying to have hallmarks of it that you go, oh, if I saw this on my Mac in Finder, that folder looks the same, or similar enough that I know what I'm looking for. I know with the name I can figure it out. And that's one we think about a lot. Like, gosh, could we get the world to unify on a single icon for folders to have that
the eyelashes are a good example of that that we brought to web, where if something's new for a file or a folder, you get what looks like little eyelashes over it.
Great. Yeah, it's one of the things, that's something I think we're trying to extend beyond just the sharing dialogue.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you'll see that continue to surface in more and more experiences we bring them across the endpoints in the product. And when we think about it, it's important not to just think, I listed off kind of the easy ones, PC, Mac, web browsers, iOS, Android, those are all obvious platforms. But when you think about OneDrive, you actually have to think much more broadly. Word, Excel, PowerPoint are all endpoints and experiences for OneDrive. So for example, in Word, Excel, and PowerPoint, you also get that same consistent sharing dialogue. And it's a critical part of making that surface in the same way. Or how we talk about things like access or controls or even policies around your content. Think DLP and how those get exposed across places.
So have you ever thought about making it something that developers could plug into so that third-party developers could invoke the same controls?
Yeah, absolutely. And so, we have in the Microsoft Graph a whole set of experiences that you can plug into to go leverage. And we think about it kind of, there's two ways. There is, hey, I'm building an app that needs to be able to access data in OneDrive, and I want to show that in the right way. And so with the Fabric controls we have today available on GitHub, you can go build experiences that let you read and write content out of a native OneDrive experience. But we also have people who are trying to build content apps that create things, right? They're creating content and putting it in there. They have their own experience and platform that they're trying to do those. In those cases, we continue to work on kind of all the background APIs that they get to leverage so that they're able to put things into the system so it will show consistently. One of the things that we've rebooted in the last several years in terms of platform for us has really been to make sure that the platform enforces consistency and compliance for those things. So you don't have to worry if someone wrote something, basic, let's say, that they're going to end up in a place where they ruin that experience or that consistency across the endpoints. It enforces all of that and helps people be a lot cleaner in terms of how they integrate.
Yeah, and a good example of that also is Flow. We now have integrated Flow into that, which we see across, and that works. Send this to Wunderlist, or go ahead and, take my email attachments and drop them into OneDrive or whatever it is you want to do. So that integration there becomes a key piece of that people can use very easily without having to have design experience to kick off after I scan this from my mobile phone, send it to my boss. And you're all about the flow.
And I know that I've built flows for my own kids to make sure anytime they accidentally use Google Drive that they sweep the files and
there you go.
Move them into OneDrive.
Very nice. So, Stephen, question to you.
Yeah.
Jason was talking about combining the consumer and commercial experience. And that's both with the mobile app, it's with the sync client, and there's probably lots of other things. But talk about the mobile app just for a second as a great entry point for our users.
Yeah, absolutely.
In whatever, work-life balance. And just talk through what that user experience is and maybe from that consolidation experience.
Sure. And I think, the goal, and this is something that Jason and I and many members of engineering have had a lot of calls on, is we want to enable everybody to work from anywhere. So the first step is get your content into the cloud. And that's the first step. I spent a lot of my time here at Microsoft before I came to OneDrive in the Windows team. And it was, let's get everybody off XP and get them to Windows 7. Now we still have a lot of folks on Windows 7. And that key thing that we hear from them, which is very different, is we want to get our stuff into the cloud. So with features like Files on Demand, features like Known Folder Move, which very simply can allow a user to take their desktop, their My Documents content, their pictures, and move that to the cloud, and then use Files on Demand to be able to see it and search it without having to have all of that content right there on the device is huge, because now that means they can go to their mobile device. They can open up their iPad or their Android tablet, and there it is, and they can work. And it's also secure. If something happens, if they get malware, if they get ransomware, we have Files Restore, which allows them to roll back and get back to that specific point in time. They can drag and drop from OneDrive into SharePoint. without even leaving the app. They can do a side-by-side. If they're working in a Word doc and they want a DICOM file, they can grab it and drag it over with their finger. So it's that work from anywhere, work from any device securely really becomes the key, but it's about helping folks to get their content into the cloud. And for larger customers, things like our fast track services and things like that, which our customers can leverage, really help with the SharePoint migration tool, which will help people to get off of file shares and move it into the cloud. So there's a wide variety of ways to do that.
So I think one thing I wanted to ask you about is that consistency of experience extends, you're mentioning larger organizations, to administrators. And with known folder sync, now check me on this.
Known folder move.
Known folder move, because I'm a SharePoint person, and so it's tentatively I have to approach a OneDrive area. But administratively, you can just empower all of your users without their having to lift a finger to take their local desktop document repositories, get them repointed to the cloud so they've get all the advantages of versioning and backup and search.
You can do it through GPO. We'll have an Intune policy in the very near future. But the key thing, and this is something in all my years doing IT before coming to Microsoft, and you guys know, is it has to be seamless and invisible to the end user. If I did it this way, I don't want to change the way I do it on Monday. So the great thing is when they if they lose their PC, not only are they going to see everything, but everything on their desktop is there. Everything in their My Docs with Exchange Online, there's their email. And that's the important stuff for people. The stuff on my desktop, my email, and my documents.
So you gave me the edge because we heard earlier how Jason is the most accomplished 18-year-old in the history of Microsoft.
Just got his license, eligible to vote.
Right.
How did you come to be part of this amazing Redmond conglomerate?
I spent 15 years as an IT pro consultant and Microsoft Gold partner. I was an MVP. It's amazing. I have 5 friends of mine who are MVPs who are now blue badges this year. It's amazing to see folks that are on the outside, much like myself, who were enamored with Microsoft products, and I think like most folks wanted to come on board to help make them better, that we felt that we know as end users what's right and wrong and came on board. And it's an amazing company now, especially with where we're at today, to really allow people that have that good peripheral vision on what our customers are asking for and coming in and bringing it to life. And features like user voice, which we just redesigned from the bottom up, is a way that our customers can talk to us via Twitter. They can reach out to me or come to our conferences or SharePoint Saturdays or any of these. And we love to meet with folks. We want to sit down. We want to hear from you. We want to get that feedback on what are we doing or what scenarios haven't we thought of, where you go, hey, I'm in a boat and I never have internet and it's me and my dog, but we have to do this and we only get, cellular service for 12 seconds. And how can we do this? And we're like, we hadn't heard that before. So let's see if more people are in a boat with their dog with 12 seconds of cell service or whatever.
Just to give everybody just a little bit of sense of not how much interest there is, but some like bleeding edge interest.
Oh, God.
The last MVP Summit, which has historically been, SharePoint MVPs or Office 365 MVPs. But as people take on more and more workloads, the session that you all ran for OneDrive was standing room only. And they have choices of where they can go. So one community, MVPs, the hardest ones to please.
Absolutely.
And they get the early knowledge of where you guys are going. That was great.
Our session at Ignite was originally scheduled, I think, for 900. We went to 12 with a room with 500 overflow. And I'm expecting this year will be even bigger because we have a very cool guest that will be joining us from a very cool company that people like, and we might have a cool giveaway for those people that show up.
Kermit the Frog from the Jim and the Muppets?
Yes, it's the Bert and Ernie bookend set. Yes.
All right,
so Bert is evil.
Maybe we won't use the podcast to launch your guest, but certainly you've got some cred.
It'll be cool, and guests that are there at our session will go, oh, that's cool.
If you haven't come to Ignite or a SharePoint conference, it is one of the most exciting times we have interacting with customers and people that have huge depth. It's one of those things where I can't recommend it enough. The team gets incredibly jazzed. I'm so excited. I can't wait to go back to Orlando.
Yeah, and it is someone at Microsoft who was new to Microsoft, who's a VP, went to Ignite last year and came away and said, oh, Ignite is basically Burning Man for SharePoint and OneDrive. Yes. Now, I do want to make clear, we're not going to construct a balsa wood church and have a shaman light it on fire.
You never know what exciting things people will come up with. The community's awesome.
Yeah.
So we've been dancing around, certainly lots of great topics. I think Chris has the tough one.
Yeah, because definitely it's a meaty question, and feel free if you after you hear it, if you two need to sync up on this.
We're going to cut the podcast and
see what I did there. We've been talking a lot about the experiences, but one of the things that people have looked to for OneDrive throughout its history, with varying success, to be fair, is synchronization. How do I have one repository and extend it to a mobile device, to a desktop, to a tablet, and so forth? Can we kind of walk through what that has evolved from and where we see that headed?
Sure.
Because one thing I know when I joined Microsoft 3 years ago that I was blown away by is the degree to which we don't just pat ourselves in the back for qualitative success, but we measure this. It'd also be great to kind of hear how you determine whether you're successful or not and how you measure that, especially when it comes to sync.
Well, let me do this. I'll share the last page of the mystery novel, and then I'll let Jason fill in the details, which is with the functionality that we now have today, a user can feel incredibly confident that once they put their content into OneDrive, it's protected, it's secure, and it's accessible from anywhere. We are encrypted on at rest and in motion. We have on the back end, if a bunch of files start changing, it's going to go, this could be malware or spyware or ransomware. We need to get involved. Messages come up for the end user. Features that allow them to go back. So for me, the thing that I feel very comfortable, and I stand like you guys in front of rooms filled with a lot of people, is say, you can feel safe and secure that your content is going to be where you need it, where you want it, and secure anywhere. That's not easy to get to that point. So once it's in there, you have it on all access points. And I switch between an iPad, a Mac, a PC, and an Android tablet. No matter what device I go to, it's all there. I plug in and I feel 100% confident around that. And as I start to collaborate with others, it all happens within those spaces very well, whether we're just using OneDrive or a combination of OneDrive and SharePoint or OneDrive, SharePoint, Teams. That really doesn't make a difference. So that's sort of the last page of the novel. I'll let Jason sort of fill in how we get to that.
And if that's the last page of the novel, maybe just always wanting to throw out new names if you ever change it again. Maybe it could be the Sherlock Drive.
There you go. Oh. We could do that.
Sherlock Drive.
Murder on the Orient Express Drive or things like that. Sure.
I don't know where to do with that.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
Chapter 1.
How nerdy do you want me to get? Like, we could talk about how we look at file system level changes and how we understand. Okay, we're going to go deep. We're going to go real deep.
Fair.
So the kind of history of these things is the way most people started by writing things that would kind of look at the disk and then every couple of seconds, every couple of minutes, scan the disk and say, did anything change?
Yes.
And depending on the file system and the operating system version and all those things, you get a lot of variety across those things. And it's not a very consistent or efficient way to do it. So over time, people have kind of evolved their sync clients to go and think, okay, well, can I register for changes? Can I ask the system to tell me about changes? And we do that today in the OneDrive sync client. It goes and says, hey, NTFS on this Windows machine, please tell me under this folder, tell me when things change. I want to know because I'm going to do work with it. At the same time, we also have mechanisms that go and say, I got a hint and I should go look at it. And I always like to describe the sync client and sync client experience as it's an asymmetric heuristic synchronization algorithm. And the reason
that sounds awesome.
It's pretty cool.
That needs an
I'll take 5.
I think I saw them play at the Fillmore West once.
They are very cool. And but the reason we say that is we talk about like asymmetric. You start talking about things like, well, what about file characters that aren't supported on all the endpoints? Because Windows and Mac don't have the same set of file characters that are supported. So how do you solve that? Okay, now you've got a problem to deal with. Or file lengths. These are different on different endpoints. Then you start getting into the really exciting stuff. You go, hey, I was uploading that file. And now I got a new change coming down because someone else was making a change. How do you resolve those kinds of conflicts? And so the sync client has to kind of decide on all of those things. The heuristic part of it is whenever it's kind of deciding without a lot of information, it's this file may have changed, kind of a question mark kind of thing. It's, I saw activity that's impacting it. How does that manage into the product? And so it's got to figure out across all of those pieces. And of course, you may be offline. So you may be making changes that we're picking up and understanding, but the cloud has been evolving at a different rate. And when you sync back up, when you go back online, you then have to resolve all of those kind of confusing questions. Like, did you delete the file first and then move the folder? And, all those, rename and what did all those kind of pieces come together? And of course, every system has different guarantees about how confident you can be in what it tells you about how it works.
This is a mystery novel, by the way.
All right.
I'm seeing the cloak and dagger.
This is, well, I will say I am, I'm incredibly lucky to be here representing the entire team that does this, because we have experts that go incredibly deep, whether with our friends in Windows, friends on Mac OS, etc., on how do things work so that we can be as smart as possible about how things should work, and then do them in an incredibly fast way. One of the releases that we announced just a few weeks ago were the updates to the power saving.
Yep.
So
that's in our latest Message Center post. Yeah.
And the sync client now is much more thoughtful on power. And so it's more capable to understand not only all these changes are coming together, how do I efficiently process them? How do I get correct? Right? Correctness is a really critical thing when we're talking about this algorithm.
Right. Or if the power is really low, it'll actually pause it saying, you're almost out of battery power. We know we're going to wait and we're going to hold off on doing this except for the one that you're working on. That's it. Other than that, we're good to go.
Yeah. And so bringing those things together kind of is both complex, but it's also really cool. I mean, it's the stuff that makes sync interesting, and it's the stuff that says, now all of that has to work, and then me as an end user, I have to not worry about it. I have to have confidence, and I need to have trust that Word document I was doing, that proposal for my boss, it's not blown away. I haven't lost anything. Everything's there. And, Stephen mentioned earlier things like the ransomware kind of challenges that folks have. And if you caught our demo at the keynote, the virtual summit back at the SharePoint conference in May, you could have seen an awesome demo where, in conjunction with Defender, we're able to catch the changes that we look at and go, those are not regular changes. Something's wrong. And then detect there's malware on this box, clean that up, prompt the user to restore, and immediately get back to a known good state. Right. All of those things kind of come together to make the sync client the robust capability.
And it's virtually invisible to the end user. And that's, again, is that key. It says, hey, we found this, we're cleaning it up, we're fixing it for you. Or an admin can say, just go here to your little icon, do restore OneDrive, and pick Friday at noon, and you'll be good to go. And it's that simple 2-click or no-click that's what end users are looking for.
I would also say, I think we've also made it critically visible to the end user. And by that I mean we give telemetry that's useful for the user to figure out the sync experience. Remember 10 years ago when we talk about SharePoint Workspace and Groove, and the classic example was, for example, you may be on an airplane. And now, with GoGo and all the services, frequently you are connected when you're on an airplane, but you have terrible bandwidth.
Yeah. Right.
And I know I personally will see sometimes that there's a huge project like Ignite, and suddenly I see, now trying to synchronize, 120, 100 meg PowerPoint files on the air, I know I probably should hit pause.
Right. Yeah. No, and in fact, bringing pause to it was entirely based on that scenario of, look, I can just make good decisions. And if you give me enough information, I'll make good decisions.
Yes. Right.
And to exactly that.
Yeah.
And I think just to kind of wrap up on sync, as an end user, the best part about it is I have one sync client to rule them all. And, in these early phases of SharePoint Server 2019, I've done just a hair testing with Bill Bear and our friend in the on-prem. And, if you rattled off everywhere where this thing syncs from, and it's only one at the end of the day going forward that you need, huge win. Yeah. Huge win.
I'm sorry, are you trying to get both Highlander and Lord of the Rings references into the same sentence?
And the show's called Ready Player OneDrive, so we're just going across the whole sci-fi fantasy,
I literally was going to go there, and I'm so glad that you brought up the mystery novel and you brought up some of the things that we'd highlighted.
For those of us that read the book before the movie.
This is a much more intellectually driven podcast than I expected from you two.
Next up, we're going to talk about Murakami and Kafka on the Shore.
So the last thing I wanted to have us focus on, and it really stems off of what you mentioned earlier. You mentioned the word migratory, and I actually wrote it down, and I thought of myself on a beach with some birds and maybe Jonathan Livingston Seagull flying around. But it really made me think files, like life, find a way. So
Jurassic Park.
Could you share with us, Stephen, a lot of this motion goes through for our big, medium, and small customers, goes through Fast Track.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the SharePoint migration tool.
Absolutely.
Talk a little bit about the program that we have to get people, helping them in where they need to go.
Yeah, there's a few things. We're going to be showing off at Ignite our new deployment hub, which we're building on docs.com, which we're working with the Fast Track teams and all the rest. So if you've not deployed OneDrive, here's where you can go to learn how to do it, how to manage it, how to do all the policies. And we're partnered very closely with Fast Track, which has great end user content and training content. Our Fast Track teams can come in on premise. It's a free service for many of our customers. They'll help them, and here's how you want to do it, and help them get moved. We also have some great paid partners that also can do that too. So you can use one or the other or a combination. And like I said, the self-service toolkit, which is great if you've got some file share, some old Buffalo drives, and you want to get that content moved up. So what's great is from the smallest customer just picking known folder move to a mid-sized company pushing out a GPO to a large customer doing a combination of these things, we can help you to get that into the cloud. You already have the service. We really want you to leverage it and use it to make it easier, like I said, for your customers to work securely from anywhere, from any device. And that's really the goal.
Well, while you were talking, I was thinking of Millard Tydings, Senator of Maryland in the 1950s. He's the one who's originally said, $1 billion here, $1 billion there, pretty soon you're talking real money. We talk a lot about single user experiences, but it's important migration can really scale. Like there have been some huge organizations with 900,000 user experiences coming from competing platforms. We
just announced Walmart last week, which is a huge organization, and they chose to do it in rings, so they tested it. They did it in rings. They pushed it out to groups of users, and end user and change management is really critical. We'll some sessions on that at Ignite, and I think that becomes a key piece too, because it's great. Now I've rolled it out. You got to get folks to use it. So it's understanding, especially at the deployment phase, how do I get my end users ready? How do I get them the content that's going to help make them successful? If you're coming from a competing product, how does this now work differently? What's better or different as I start to do that? And how do I get people on board? And it's often finding one or two people from each team, from HR and from marketing, who are going to be the experts. We've seen some of our customers do some great things at lunch where they have swag and they have experts and they kind of talk through this, or companies like Home Depot who did a whole branded experience for their end users that moved them through training. So we've just seen some great things from customers. We have some exciting customers we're going to bring on stage at Ignite to talk about how they're doing that. I know in our pre-day, we're going to talk about the Department of Justice and how they moved forward and brought OneDrive on board and got government who's not known for being the speediest, easiest people to deal with change, and how they got them to move forward with that. So those cases are incredibly important.
Very cool. Very cool.
So Jason, Stephen, thanks a lot for coming on with us today.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having me.
So what's the best place for our audience to go to learn more about you and what's coming up with OneDrive?
Tech Community blog is probably the best. So that's techcommunity.microsoft.com/OneDrive. We are now doing bi-weekly Message Center posts. So all the things that come out in Message Center, we're posting those there, as well as additional information, blog posts on the cool new features and functionality. They can always reach out to me via Twitter at Stephen L. Rose or Jason at Jasmo, which you can do. Go out to our user voice, which is a great place if you have features that you want to upvote or suggest for us. We want to do that. And just come find us at any of the conferences and reach out to us. We love sitting down and chatting and talking and hearing what you like, what you don't like, and what we could always do better.
Yeah, so we'll have all of that in the show notes, and
Awesome.
We're going to put in any maybe things that we referenced, make sure that people can find maybe the latest OneDrive breakout session, and certainly all of the things that you listed there.
We'll throw Jason's address in there too, so if people are coming through Seattle, need a little place to crash.
Yeah, I
sounds
can debug some sync clients and help people get set up
Sure,
on where to work.
And have Oreos.
Maybe a giant OneDrive RV that we park outside Jason's house.
I'm down with
Your
that.
you
wife
can load
would
up everybody.
love that.
Maybe you can just think about that one.
Yeah, I'll see.
Well, we certainly hope you guys can stick around with us for the rest of the show. We want to talk about some of your most recent frequently asked questions later on. And again, thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
There are, of course, a lot of articles and apps out there. They're very specific to OneDrive. So we chose a couple that would certainly give you a little bit more to go on and maybe more things to use. So, Chris, thinking in terms of an app or article of the week, what is yours?
Well, for mine, I'm actually going to give you a twofer for OneDrive.
Ooh.
The first key app of the week I want to mention is Office 365 Home, which some folks might not be familiar with. But when you subscribe your family, which is up to 5 people, to Office 365 Home, everyone in your family gets to share in the 5 terabytes of storage you get for your personal storage. I've gone through this exercise extremely recently with my own kids who found that the amount of storage that you get inside of iCloud is relatively minimal, and rather than pay extra for that there, hooking them into my family's Office 365 Home gave them a great way to get all the storage they need for as many photos as an 11-year-old girl can take in a month. And then beyond that, I'm sure there's another upgrade. But the key app I really want to focus on is a website called customvision.ai. Over the past year, we've introduced a lot of capabilities to bring cognitive services and image recognition into OneDrive, and by extension to the rest of Office 365. So we can automatically profile an image when we see it to be able to pull out text, to be able to recognize locations, and there's about 35 or so objects that we can automatically tag an image with. Things like, is this outdoors? Are there people in it? Is this a receipt or a whiteboard? So one question that we encounter a lot is how do people enrich that? Customvision.ai is a website that lets you build your own image recognition models. And it's really not hard to use. First and foremost, I've used it. Second, I have taught preteens to use it. And once you upload a couple of photos and show how they want to be tagged, you click the train button, and now you have a cloud-based AI model that anyone can use if they know your key. And then with Microsoft Flow, you can automatically scan any image repository as new files come in your personal camera roll. You can see that it's come in, you can pass it into the model and have it automatically tagged based on your classification rules.
Yeah, for me, just watching what the team has been doing, originally I thought, ooh, look at all the cool end user experiences that are in consumer. I hope those come to business.
Right.
But the opposite is sometimes, ooh, look at some of the high-end capabilities that we have in business. Oh my God, they're now available to end users. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's great. Great example, great app article, and really experience of the week, it sounds like.
Yeah. Mark, what's your app?
So my app this week is really turning to beyond the users, but really with the users in the peripheral and the frontal vision of how are people actually using this as a service. In the services world, a lot of IT and certainly a lot of business decision makers need to, on a recurring basis, prove out the value of what it is that they're spending money on. And OneDrive is a big part of that. And so with OneDrive, from a user activity perspective, now we've introduced, or I would say in some senses reintroduced, where there's a lot more capabilities and have just up-leveled this. It's now bucketed under the Microsoft 365 usage analytics. Maybe a little bit of a mouthful, but we'll put a link in the show notes that takes you to an article about it and then certainly how to configure and set it up. But for OneDrive, essentially think of this as a dashboard that gives you a high-level view of the value you're getting from OneDrive for Business. And this is in terms of numbers of file, how much storage you're using across the organization. And then you can drill in to understand the trends of the OneDrive account usage. How many files a user is interacting with, how much storage each individual is using, certainly holistically across the whole company. And it gives a lot of details in terms of what's happening across the 7-day period, a 30-day period, 90-day period, and 100-day period. And you get a lot of nice charts and a lot of nice insights that you can even take further and bring it into the full power of BI. It's built out of Power BI, sort of that unique instance of the first experience. But if you know what you're doing, you need to build out unique reports, you can certainly do that. So previously, this was known as Office 365 Reports, OneDrive for Business Usage, but it now falls under OneDrive, under the Microsoft 365 Usage Analytics, which really is just an indication that it's become more of the service, more robust, more capabilities, and it's right there with inside the admin console that you would expect.
I think most people are reassured. You build all these technologies, you ship them out, and if you're an IT administrator, you deploy them to your organization. You want to actually confirm that it isn't just the qualitative user stories like, oh, this is great, but that you can actually prove, here's where it is, here's what the usage is. I know that we look at a top level at what that is. And, growing by we're adding, nearly 2 or 3 megabytes a week of new storage. It's actually a lot more than that. We're not going to talk about how big it is, but it's huge. And it's great to be able to meter that and help shape adoption at the organizational level.
Yep. And one plug for the engineering team, I can say this both across SharePoint and OneDrive, even though they essentially are the same team. But as the individual teams who own the individual experiences, from a storage perspective, they have always been keeping ahead of the customer from an actual usage. Sometimes perception leads, but actual usage, they've been keeping ahead of the game in terms of people have never actually hit our storage limits on the scale of the breadth of the world. Continuing on our OneDrive voyage, we invited a captain of the OneDrive ship all the way from Germany, and he's floating the seas. He's ready to chat all about OneDrive. He knows it deeply. Hans Brender in the community is known as Mr. OneDrive. Hans, thank you very much for joining us. We've got you calling in from all in Germany. I first want to ask Stephen just to give you a little bit of a explanation of what he knows about you and some of the things that he sees you doing in the community.
Yeah, absolutely. Hans has been an amazing member of our community, both in our Microsoft OneDrive Experts program and as an MVP, and as someone who I think just has got a great, deep technical knowledge, and not just of OneDrive, but across the Office 365 stack. So it's been so great to work with him and have him be part of the program.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And Hans, again, thank you for joining us. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself and really what you focus on most?
In 2003, I was a CEO of an agency to Microsoft for pre-sale consultants here in Germany, working as a Microsoft vendor. We do a lot of stuff with different people. And if my consultants cannot work for a present job, I do it. And therefore, I have a big knowledge from the background of all these stuff. And 2006, that was the first thing I was first trained with Groove. So therefore, that was my first thinking about collaboration. That was my first training. In 2010, Groove becomes part of the SharePoint Workspace 2010. And in the same time, I started my blog, and therefore I have now near 800 posts about OneDrive. And I also talk in SharePoint Saturdays in Europe against all these stuff. And last year, I talk, although at Ignite, it was a great pleasure for me talking about OneDrive and the self-automatism and so on.
So you've got a little bit of history with OneDrive and all iterations of OneDrive before that. And I actually think all of us are platformed on SQL. I actually think I'm standing on SQL right now. But with all of your blog posts, with all of your events, with all of your interactions, what is the number one thing that customers are curious about when they first start to think, what is this thing called OneDrive?
The first thing customers ask me, people had a little bit problem in the old days. And Germany is a little bit special, but I think the whole people around the world does not know, hey, what's the difference between OneDrive Personal and OneDrive for Business? So you and Microsoft all together says OneDrive. And we can talk, hey, is this OneDrive Personal or OneDrive for Business?
I ask a question as you're talking to companies leveraging OneDrive because deployment is a huge part of this. And I know that you and I have spent a lot of time on everything from autopilot to known folder move and those features. But what are the key things that you tell people that really helps to drive usage of OneDrive? What are the 2 or 3 key things they go, oh, that's great because it's important to get management to roll it out and, getting the users to use it is that key second part of that.
So the technical part is the first thing, but then we have to think my special thing nowadays, although for a special thing, I have to say the IT has deployed OneDrive and nobody is running it. So people has to know to tell the users, show the user with different cases how to use OneDrive and how this may speed up your work. People don't know that. It's not a number of like Dropbox or like a file server. It's different. And therefore, the IT cannot help us. We have to have other persons that bring up the cases to us, taking with OneDrive for Business.
It's also about changing how people work. It's really starting to think about a cloud-first relationship that once you get things into OneDrive, It's not just about access, but it's about protection. With Files Restore and those features, it's now that your stuff is not just in the cloud, but it's accessible everywhere. It's safe and secure, and that's a big part of the change management. And I know that you spend some time walking people through that.
So the big thing, I think, yes, it's very important that people make this knowledge. That's the end user. From a technical perspective, for the admins and so on, that's very important that the admins say, hey, yes, it's secure with all this stuff behind the scene.
So one thing that we'd love to get your take on when you think about these users as they start to learn how OneDrive works, what they can do with it, sometimes it comes to that capability of syncing. You gave us a bit of a history of syncing from groove.exe all the way up to the present. And if you really think about that journey for a user, some of that is the comfort of reliability. How can I trust this service to basically do what I need it to do all the time, always on? What's your take on sync? And not maybe just how does it work, but what do you love about it? And what are some of those things when you think of how it's grown and matured? What is sync of today?
Let me go a little bit in the past. So starting with sync, with the old sync client, with the groove.exe, we use it also at the render work. So there were several teams. Now we call it teams. And we do not use a server. If people has to change it, the team's leader or someone, that's very interesting that we only have to change. And he also got the complete stuff and synced all the data to these people. We never use a server. But later, we migrate all these things to SkyDrive. That's the next version. That's the old OneDrive Personal. And that was a little bit better. The protocol runs a little bit smoother. And the biggest issue in these days was more and more content and greater content of pictures and videos come up. So that was the next thing that we have to do and handle all this stuff. And the issues with the old sync client called groove.exe, that was a little bit apart, still using it or don't still using it. I think we have now a stable area for syncing, but also we can try it and we see it a little bit with sharing all this stuff. And therefore, that's for me the best way that we have metadata behind the scene. People don't know that in the Windows environment, but also that these machines are talking to different devices, iOS devices, Android devices. And the people saw that, hey, that's the same pop-up that comes up if you want to share it. That makes a great opportunity for the next part of the future.
The important thing is that it does work. Every time you turn to it, it is going to work. And obviously with the re-engineering, re-platforming, and really the access from any point, that it is the same access, the same set of files, same set of actions. Obviously, you've kind of hung through it for quite some time.
So Hans, with that said, you and I have been working together now for about 2 years. As you take a look at the product, what are the big features that makes your job easier?
Sure. That was the beginning of the consequent development. I have to put it in 6 steps. One is the first redesign, running the context not on the machine, running now in the context of a user. The second step was the basic function, sync. It was a stable sync. The third was basic function like links. Now we have links in there and can put it all together. The fourth is enhanced function like co-authoring. Okay, we can talk about a third or fourth, but it doesn't matter. The fifth are also, again, enhanced with date to end automatically for external. And the sixth are enhanced functions like sharing, get and put relevant metadata with the sync client to Windows in this part. That's a very interesting thing that we have all this stuff together. That's the 6 points, I think, that was in the last 2 years was done very excellent.
Going back to the foundation of the product so that the functionality we added on top of it works and works the way that people expect.
Sometimes it's not a deep dive technology. So sometimes SharePoint in all this stuff, it's much more deeper, but it's part of the ecosystem. And people don't realize it's the same question. Hey, we want to use Teams. What do I have to install? And you say, hey, if you have Office 365, you have all these part of technology in the background. And you can also have, if you want to do it, for me, is sometimes if I want to have OneDrive and people saying to me, hey, hey, can I have to talk with you about OneDrive? And several people also have a new tenant. Now I have 3 or 4 tenants in one ecosystem that works great. But people want to say, why do you want that? Why do you want to sync? The sync stuff with 1709 is the best way. This product is, for me, 50% of production. It speeds up 50% because I know it inside my area and I can store my files in there. In the background, it will sync and with all this stuff. So therefore, I try to give also the best way we want to do. And sometimes it takes a little bit longer.
I find the conversations that you're describing might actually be the very first conversations that these users are having with their first experience in the cloud. Do you ever get that sense that you're sort of the first cloud trainer, not just OneDrive trainer?
Maybe that could be. I also have, we are an Azure company, or no, we are going to give the people, the companies outside, the possibility going to Azure on Office 365. And we have a lot of consultants that have a lot of technical stuff. And I say, hey, you can do that behind the scene. I have to look what they are doing, and therefore it's cloud. Yes. Now you know what is going on in the future means, yes, it could be a cloud possibility. So thinking of also again, and it's the last sentence for this one, that I have to say, people, you don't have to write Office 365. We have to talk about Microsoft 365. That means, yes, it's more about all this stuff, security and all these things. And people don't understand.
What is the future of OneDrive in the next 2, maybe even 3 years?
I think enhanced sharing, and I think all the metadata. If you have more and more metadata in there, that must be the interesting things. It's not only the think time, it's completely now involved. And I have to say, the people, although it's inside Office, I write a letter or write a blog post in my Word, and I share it directly out of Word. I store it in OneDrive, wherever I want to store it, and then I say, click on one button and I can share it from this one. So that's the part of work I have done in the past, but without these sharing capabilities. I do not have to switch again and so on. Therefore, in this environment, that's the best thing we can do it. And not only in the Office environment, but also thinking about an API for other people, for other products, to have the same possibility, to have a sharing button. So it's imagining what you can have in the future.
Hans, I love to hear how you think about OneDrive. I think your syncing is sound, and that OneDrive certainly has a future with the way that you present it. We hope that we keep up with your pace.
I do want to add one quick thing about our blog. We're now posting bi-weekly both message center posts, and as we have key features, we're certainly going in deep on that. And Hans, you do some great job on that as well. But as we take a look at those 6 core pillars, how are we ensuring that people are leveraging all of that functionality across?
Yes, that is one of the things you have to do it, because people ask me, hey, I have a new version. What's in there? And if it's not a insider version, it's a normal version. Not only say, hey, we have to do this and this, 1 sentence or 2 sentences about the stuff.
And that's what we're doing. So that's great. And I appreciate all that you've done, Hans, and helping us to make people aware of that. And Mark, thanks so much for having us on today.
Absolutely welcome. Hans, I say the same as Stephen. Thanks for joining us today all the way from Germany. Amazing how we can blend this together and all be one drive, one group, one podcast. So I think the favorite part about this show certainly is when we have people like you who are experts in your field. You get a lot of questions, and so to the advantage of our listeners, they're going to get the answers to your most frequently asked questions.
Okay.
Stephen, what is your FAQ this week?
Should I use OneDrive as my backup tool? When we released Known Folder Move a few weeks ago, which we do desktop, My Documents, and Pictures, one of the things we don't do is favorites. And people are like, why aren't you including favorites? I want them to migrate. Well, A, a lot of the browsers already do that. But B, OneDrive is not a backup tool. And here's why I say that. That when I think of a backup, I think if my laptop dies, you should be able to, by putting a few buttons, rebuild that laptop right up to where I left. And we don't do apps. That's managed through, MDM. We don't do a lot of those things. Our goal is your documents are available everywhere. They're safe in the cloud. The same with your photos and desktops. All of that other stuff that makes up your machine, your PSTs, if you're still not on Exchange Online, all of that, OneDrive's not meant to do. So that's really a key piece. And there are some great tools, and we work with those, but we want to make sure it's protect your documents, access from anywhere. So that's absolutely number one. Number two I get is, how do I know which is the most current version of OneDrive and how do I get it? And it's important to know that we're always going out and looking. We don't update like Office on this. We come out, if there's a new version, if there's something we need to do better or fix or bring out, we're going to do that. And if there's new functionality, that's something we let you know in advance, and we do a message center post and we bring that in. But you can go out to our support pages and it'll tell you what's the current enterprise, what's the extended ring, what's the current version for Mac. And with Mac, what's important there, and I get this, is I'm running the App Store version. Should I download the downloadable version for Mac, which now, by the way, is built into the Office client. So when you install Mac for Office, that installs. And the answer is yes, because it stays persistent in the Finder and it launches at startup. And the App Store version doesn't do that. So if you're running the App Store version, we encourage you to go to your OneDrive, click download that. It'll get rid of the other one. And those are probably two or three of the biggest. Jason, what do you tend to run into?
Yeah, so, I was just going to say, if people are looking for the version number, our guest that we talked to a little bit earlier, Hans Brender, you could probably just mention him on Twitter. Yeah. He'll tell you the exact number.
Yep.
So, Jason, I think when people hear somebody from the OneDrive engineering team, Chris, Steven, and I are from the marketing, they're like, they might have the answer. But, you come on stage or you walk into with a customer and they're going to ask you probably some of the hard questions. What is your most frequently asked question?
Oh, it's really funny. The hard questions are always the most fun. But if I kind of dug into what are the most common questions, one of the number one questions I've gotten in the last 2 years has been, hey, so I've got OneDrive, it's been deployed to me, or I've deployed it to my end users. That's great for sharing inside the company, but I want to share outside the company. What do you recommend? And often it's because they're not aware that from OneDrive and SharePoint, you can easily share externally. This has been one of the things I've been really excited and proud about. So that means that for any file or folder, you can take it and then decide to say, I want to share this with people outside my organization. And that you can do either whether it's Office 365 to Office 365 in a secure way. You can use their email address. They're going to get the email with a link to that. When they come back, they have to prove who they are to be able to get access to that file. It's going to show up and shared with me. All of those things work there. In addition, you can share with people that don't even have Office 365. Maybe it's just some user who's got a Gmail account. They're a small organization. They've got a Hotmail account. They've got something else. Well, in that case, you can share externally by actually setting a PIN code on it. And you can actually say, oh, I'm going to send you this link. And every time you click on it to go view it, they're just going to type in a PIN. And that just happens by typing in the email address you want to share to and setting that you want it to be secure.
No MSA account required. That's the key thing.
There's a good golf clap.
Absolutely.
That's great. Great progress.
And of course, you can do that anonymously as well. So you can send someone a link and it can be anonymous. Anyone on the internet, that gets the link could use it if that's what you want. Some material maybe that's okay with. And then we recently announced that coming this year, we'll be bringing password protections. You can actually do the same thing, sharing externally with someone and add a password to it. So when they go click on that link and type it in, they have to know the password as well.
And you as the person sharing set that password.
Correct. Exactly right.
Yep.
That's great.
And block download, which we're bringing too, which will keep people from downloading or printing whatever it is that you're having them work on. So those are all really key features, and we'll see those all before Ignite.
Some of those block download features get into a question area I hear about a lot, which is on the security and compliance side. And I talk to a lot of organizations about information architecture and how they're moving for really sophisticated content services regimes, a lot of which deal with things like retention and records management. I had this question actually at 8 o'clock this morning about, so if we want to do something that is sophisticated about information management, we have to keep all of that information inside of SharePoint. I get the question a lot, and the answer is absolutely not. So everything that we have in the Advanced Data Governance platform, we were able to real-time discover, automatically classify, and apply a label to enforce retention and records management policy. That extends uniformly throughout all of Office 365, including OneDrive. So you don't necessarily need to take advantage of move capabilities to get things to SharePoint to be able to retain them. You can enforce that policy right where that document is usually born, which is inside of OneDrive.
I love to demo when you create a DLP policy. I think it's the third step. Let's say you pick PII data. The next one, it says choose all platforms, and you see SharePoint, OneDrive, and Exchange Online. So if you've already set up those policies for Exchange, you can just say, this goes to all the exit sharing points. So that's what's great is you're doing that you're exactly correct. You're doing that with a single policy across and a single pane of glass to manage that. And the Security Compliance Center is so powerful, whether you're looking at file auditing, DLP, data governance, security, and so many of our competitors charge extra for that. It's built in there, and it works beautifully across, as you put it so eloquently, across that whole platform. So I think that's very important.
Thank you very much for sharing everything today.
Yeah.
We're very excited in terms of what we think the questions that we're going to be asked about a year from now are going to be, because there's a lot of innovation we're working on that we're not talking about.
So the common question, certainly that I think we all get, but when we started to make the distinction between SharePoint and OneDrive, people asked, should I save my documents to OneDrive for Business or a document library in a team site? And we've boiled it down. There's a really nice article that I think a number of people have worked on that's out there if you want to get sort of the read on what it is. But in OneDrive for Business, we really focus on that's a place for your documents maybe in their early stages, drafts, or it's private for a period of time. The kind of second part of that is maybe you don't plan to share them broadly, so nobody really needs to access them. You're not opening up to other members of the team. The third component of that is if you're sharing a document that doesn't warrant the creation or the editing or the other capabilities just on that one document, you wouldn't create a whole team site around a single document. That's pretty straightforward. But when you start to move and consider team sites and document libraries, that's when you want to open it up to the rest of the team. Give automatic permissions where you don't have to go and share it with a bunch of people. It's automatically shared with them. It's easier for document collaboration from a permissions perspective, but it's also in association with a whole host of other things, maybe other files, pages, other sites that are connected. And essentially what you're trying to do there is increase the collaboration visibility and maybe potentially start to connect them to more of the team workflow. Not that you can't do flows and connecting them in OneDrive. So it really is when you start to think about ownership beyond the individual.
Yes. And I think the key thing is there, we've had some customers that have said, we're just going to put everything in OneDrive. And you know what? That's absolutely fine if that's the way that makes the most sense for your folks and to manage it. But then my question, whether you're using our product or anybody's, is what happened when that person leaves? Who now gets control and who's going to reset up all those shares? The other thing is what happens when somebody new comes into the project or somebody leaves the project? Knowing what's happened, whether you're using Teams or SharePoint, to be able to see all the conversations and all the things that have been shared and what folks are working on, to have that history really can help people get up to speed more quickly and be certainly able to work smarter, better, faster, and be a part of that. So I think that's that thing to keep in mind is, yes, you could do it all inside of OneDrive if you want to, and it's built to do that, and that's great. But you gain so much more when you start to leverage Teams, when you start to leverage SharePoint, and using the Windows Explorer as the tool because you can sync those sites to just drag and drop everything into it and work and never have to go into those GUIs really can make a lot of sense. And it's worth it for those companies to understand the value that they will get by expanding that universe a little bit and giving people those choices, how it can really help them to be better employees and better collaborators.
Yeah.
And that's really the key.
And just recently at the Inspire conference, Satya Nadella stood up on stage and gave a walkthrough of how he works through his day.
Yep.
And he really framed it around the different loops that we work in, the inner loop, the outer loop. And he kind of called around Outlook being his open loop.
Yeah.
And I think of OneDrive and Outlook sort of play that same role of your open, maybe your personal environment. Mm-hmm. And when you really think about that, answering this question, should I do this with, or how should I accomplish what I'm trying to accomplish? The different scenarios land on different tools.
Correct.
But at the same time, the way you're building them is they're actually all integrated experiences as you move through the life cycle of a project, or a particular file may move from starting in OneDrive to landing in a team site with some policies that get sent off to the publishing team, however that might work.
If you go to a Chinese restaurant and you can order one dish, and that's just fine, but the best experiences are going to be from collaborating that meal with a group of people, having a big lazy Susan and being able to pull from everything. That becomes a really great shared experience, and working is the same way. It's fine for you to hang on to it and do it yourself, but when you're sharing it, you're going to get so much more out of that experience. And I think that's really critical.
So, Maitre D, let's bring in some dim sum, and we're going to fly over to Germany, and we're going to get Hans, who's still on the line with us. Hans, what is your FAQ this week?
The question is, how do I get rid of the old Groove client? So the question is yes and no. Means you cannot have to deinstall only the Groove client, and you can hide it. So it depends of how many machines are involved and so on. That's the problem. You cannot have it to deinstall it in one way. You have to deinstall Office completely and install a new Office. That's a perfect way, but you cannot do it with a number of clients. Therefore, it depends. It depends on the machine, how you update, and you can also hide it. That's the other thing. That's not a perfect answer, I know, but that's the most important question I always get once a week.
Well, I think that's great advice. Certainly, if you can, you start with a clean install and you won't ever have groove.exe. But if you're evolving over time and certainly have been with us for a while, it's okay to have groove.exe on your desktop. But most of everything is going to go through the next-gen sync client. That's great. Thank you all for your great questions. We're certainly always glad to have you here. Always great to get your mind share and the willingness to share out to our one audience.
We'll see everybody at Ignite.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's always great to let people know where they can actually plug in person. There's a lot of opportunities around the world, locally, big, small. Chris, give us a little rundown of what's coming up.
There's really only one place to focus on coming up next month, and that, of course, is Ignite, coming back to Orlando, Florida, September 24th to 29th. We are nearly sold out. We will be bringing over 100 folks from the SharePoint and OneDrive product teams, along with 35,000 of our nearest and dearest friends from around the world, and even more gathered online. So it is the best place to come to get all your answers for any questions you have across all of Microsoft, especially SharePoint.
Excellent. So we'll put a direct registration link. Come join us in Orlando for Ignite. And certainly up until that, think about SharePoint Saturdays, going in, sharing your voice there, listening to all the experts that go around the regions. We'll have the links to SharePoint Saturday and any other event. But like Chris said, if you're really interested in best practices, news and announcements, big moment for Microsoft to share to the world, Ignite.
Thank you to our guests, Stephen Rose and Jason Moore from the OneDrive team, and Hans Brender, Mr. OneDrive, Dankeschön.
If you have a question for the SharePoint team or a great story to share about your experience with SharePoint or OneDrive, send an email to the intrazone@microsoft.com or post a tweet to @SharePoint or @OneDrive.
If you're new to the show, catch up on previous episodes of the Intrazone by subscribing to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your favorite podcasts.
And please rate and review the show. It really is the best way for us to get the show out there to more people, to really know what you think about it so that we can change and evolve it as you like it. Thank you for listening and considering all that you've heard on this episode. I'm your host, Mark Cashman, here with Chris McNulty. This has been The Intrazone, a show about the SharePoint Intelligent Intranet.
At Grand Canyon University, we believe in equal opportunity, and the American dream starts with purpose. Whether your pursuit involves a bachelor's, master's, or doctoral degree, GCU's learning environments are designed for supportive networking and collaboration. With over 330 academic programs, GCU provides a path to help you fulfill your dreams. The pursuit to serve others is yours. Find your purpose at GCU. Private, Christian, affordable. Visit gcu.edu.